19-year-old kid is sweeping floors in a New York recording studio. 20 years later, he's producing the biggest albums in the world. 20 years after that, he sells a headphone company to Apple for $3 billion. How does that even happen? March of 2014, Cupertino, California. Jimmy Iovine is sitting across from Tim Cook in Apple headquarters. And look, I'm reconstructing this from multiple sources here. Interviews Iovine gave later, reports from Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, people who were close to the negotiations. But here's what we know for sure. Apple is about to write the biggest check in its entire history for an acquisition. $3 billion. $3 billion. For a headphone company that most people think just makes overpriced fashion accessories, the Apple board is skeptical. Some executives are openly questioning if this makes any sense. Wall Street analysts are already writing think pieces about how Apple is overpaying. But Tim Cook sees something different. He sees two guys, Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre, who understand something Apple doesn't. They understand culture. They understand music. They understand how to make products people don't just buy, they obsess over. And when the deal closes in May of 2014, Jimmy Iovine, the kid who started out sweeping floors in recording studios, becomes one of the highest paid executives at the most valuable company on earth. But to understand how he got there, we need to go back to Brooklyn, 1953, because that's where this whole thing starts. I'm Alex Morgan, this is Behind the Billion, and today we're breaking down one of the most insane career trajectories I've ever researched. Jimmy Iovine, from studio janitor to one of the most powerful people in music to tech billionaire. And the crazy part, he never followed a conventional path, not once. Every single move he made, people told him he was wrong. The entire industry told him he was wrong. And every single time, he proved them all wrong. Now look, I spent the last 2 weeks reading everything I could find about Jimmy Iovine, and I mean everything. His autobiography, interviews spanning 4 decades, Billboard profiles, that incredible HBO documentary series, The Defiant Ones, which is probably the best inside look at his partnership with Dr. Dre. I went through SEC filings from the Beats acquisition, shareholder letters, analyst reports from when the deal was announced. I watched probably 30 hours of interviews he's given over the years, and here's what became clear to me. This isn't just a rags to riches story. This is a story about someone who understood something fundamental about how culture works, how music works, how technology and art intersect, that nobody else in his generation figured out. The stakes here are massive. We're talking about a guy who shaped modern music production, who built one of the most controversial and successful record labels in history, who saw the digital music revolution coming before anyone else, and who then pivoted into consumer electronics and sold that company to Apple for more money than Apple had ever paid for anything. Ever. $3 billion. To put that in perspective, when Apple bought Beats in 2014, it was more than they'd paid for all their previous acquisitions combined. Every single one, added together. So how does a kid from Brooklyn with no connections, no money, no formal training, end up in a position where Tim Cook is writing him a $3 billion check? That's what we're figuring out today. And I'm telling you, when you see the pattern, when you understand the decision-making framework Iovine used, it's going to change how you think about career moves, about risk, about timing. All right, let's go back to the beginning. 1953, Brooklyn, New York, Red Hook neighborhood. Jimmy Iovine is born into a working-class Italian family. His father is a longshoreman working the docks. This is important context because it shapes everything about how Iovine approaches business later. He grows up watching his father do brutal physical labor for modest pay, watches him deal with union politics, mob connections, the whole thing. And from what Iovine has said in interviews, he learned something crucial from watching his dad. Hard work matters, but smart work matters more. Now, I can't confirm every detail of his childhood, I wasn't there, but from what he's shared in various interviews over the years, music becomes his obsession early. He's listening to everything. Motown, rock and roll, early soul music. And he's not just listening casually, he's studying it, trying to understand how the songs are constructed, how the production works, why certain records sound better than others on the radio. By the time he's a teenager, he knows he wants to work in music. But here's the thing, and this is where the story gets interesting. He doesn't want to be a musician. He doesn't play an instrument particularly well. He's not trying to be a performer. He wants to work behind the scenes. He wants to be in the studio. And this is unusual, right? Most kids who love music want to be rock stars. They want to be on stage. Iovine wants to be the guy behind the glass, making the records. So here's what he does, and I found this detail in an interview he gave to Billboard in the early 2000s. He's 19 years old, living at home in Brooklyn, and he starts calling every recording studio in New York City, just cold calling, over and over. Do you need help? I'll do anything. I'll sweep floors, I'll get coffee, I don't care. And most of them hang up on him or tell him they're not hearing. But one studio, the record plant in New York, they say, okay, come in. We'll give you a shot. March of 1973, Iovine shows up for his first day at the record plant, and his job is exactly what he said he'd do: sweeping floors, getting coffee, moving equipment. He's making basically nothing. I think it was like $50 or $60 a week based on what I could find, barely enough to cover his subway fare and lunch. But here's what nobody else understands. Iovine isn't there for the money. He's there to learn. He's there to watch. He's there to absorb everything he possibly can about how great records get made. And the record plant in the early 70s, it's one of the most important studios in the world. Everyone's recording there. John Lennon is there working on albums. Jimi Hendrix had been there before he died. Stevie Wonder is there. The studio is the epicenter of the New York music scene. So Iovine is sweeping floors, but he's also watching legendary producers and engineers work. He's staying late, asking questions, offering to help with anything. Now here's where the story accelerates, and this is documented in multiple sources. I found it in his biography and confirmed it in interviews with people who were there. There's a young engineer at the record plant named Roy Cicala. Cicala is John Lennon's engineer. He works on all of Lennon's solo records, and he notices Iovine, notices that this kid is always around, always paying attention, always eager to help. So Cicala starts teaching him, showing him how the equipment works, letting him sit in on sessions. And Iovine is obsessed, I mean truly obsessed. He's working 16, 18-hour days, sleeping on the couch in the studio sometimes, learning everything he can about microphone placement, about mixing, about how to capture performances. And the thing is, he's not just learning the technical side. He's learning how to talk to artists, how to make them comfortable, how to get the best performance out of them. He's learning psychology as much as engineering. 1974, this is the moment that changes everything. Roy Cicala is supposed to engineer John Lennon's album Walls and Bridges, but Cicala gets sick or has a conflict. The sources vary on exactly what happened, and he can't do it. And Lennon needs an engineer, fast. They're already booked into the studio. Time is money. They need someone who knows the room, knows the equipment. And Cicala recommends Iovine, John Lennon, one of the Beatles, one of the most famous people on planet Earth. And Cicala is recommending this 21-year-old kid who was sweeping floors a year earlier. Now think about this for a second. The pressure on Iovine in this moment is insane. If he screws this up, if the album sounds bad, his career is over before it starts. He'll be known as the kid who ruined a John Lennon record. But if he succeeds, if he can actually pull this off, everything changes. So what happens? The sessions start. And according to what Iovine has said in interviews, and this is confirmed by other people who were in the studio, Lennon is difficult. He's in a weird place personally, separated from Yoko, drinking heavily, volatile. The sessions are chaotic, but Iovine handles it. He knows when to push, when to back off, when to suggest something, when to stay silent. And the album comes out in September of 1974, Walls and Bridges, and it's good. Really good. It goes to #1. The single, Whatever Gets You Through the Night, becomes Lennon's first #1 hit as a solo artist. And just like that, Jimmy Iovine isn't the floor-sweeping kid anymore. He's the guy who engineered the John Lennon comeback album. He's 21 years old, and every major artist in New York suddenly wants to work with him. Wait, actually, let me back up for a second, because I glossed over something important. The decision to recommend Iovine for that Lennon session. That's Roy Cicala betting his entire reputation on this kid. If Iovine fails, it reflects badly on Cicala. His judgment gets questioned. But Cicala sees something in Iovine that makes him willing to take that risk. And this becomes a pattern in Iovine's career. Over and over, people bet on him. People who don't have to, who have nothing to gain and everything to lose, they vouch for him. Why? I think it's because Iovine makes people believe in him. He has this intensity, this commitment, that makes you want to give him a shot. Okay, so now it's 1975. Iovine is the hot young engineer in New York, and he gets a call that's going to define the next phase of his career. Bruce Springsteen needs an engineer for his next album. And this isn't just any album. This is supposed to be the album that makes Springsteen a superstar. He's already critically acclaimed, already has a cult following, but commercially he hasn't broken through yet. His first 2 albums sold okay, but not great. This third album. This has to be the one. The album is Born to Run, and the producer is John Landau, who's also Springsteen's manager. And Landau wants Jimmy Iovine to engineer it. Now, I've read multiple accounts of these sessions. There's a book called Born to Run by Springsteen himself where he talks about it. There's a documentary about the making of the album. And from everything I can piece together, these sessions were brutal. They recorded the title track alone for 6 months. 6 months on one song. They're perfecting every single element, every guitar part, every drum fill. Springsteen is a perfectionist, Landau is a perfectionist, and Iovine is in the middle trying to capture this massive, cinematic sound they're going for. The album comes out in August of 1975, and it's exactly what everyone hoped for: massive critical success, commercial breakthrough. Springsteen ends up on the cover of Time and Newsweek in the same week. The album goes triple platinum eventually, and Jimmy Iovine, 22 years old, is now known as the engineer who made Born to Run. But here's what's interesting to me, and this is where you start to see Iovine's mindset forming. He could have stayed in New York, could have built a comfortable career engineering hit records for major artists. Safe, well-paid, prestigious. Most people would have done that, but Iovine sees something else. He sees that the real power isn't with the engineers, it's with the producers. The producers are the ones making the creative decisions, shaping the artist's vision, getting points on the album, building wealth. So what does he do? He starts transitioning, taking on production work in addition to engineering. And in 1978, he produces his first major album, Patti Smith, Easter. And the album has Because the Night, which becomes Patti Smith's biggest hit. It's a top 20 single. The album goes gold. And now Iovine isn't just an engineer anymore. He's a producer. He's moving up the ladder. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Late 70s, early 80s. Iovine is producing huge records. He works with Tom Petty on Damn the Torpedoes, which is a massive commercial breakthrough for Petty. He produces Stevie Nicks' first solo album, Belladonna, which goes quadruple platinum. He's producing U2, he's producing Simple Minds, he's working with all these massive acts. And he's making good money. Not wealthy yet, but comfortable. Very comfortable. But he's watching something happen in the music industry that's starting to concern him. Actually, let me rephrase that. He's seeing an opportunity that nobody else is seeing. It's the mid-80s. MTV has completely changed the game. Music videos are now as important as the songs themselves. And the major labels, the establishment, they're still operating like it's 1970. They're signing safe artists, making safe decisions, avoiding controversy. In Iovine's thinking, there's a whole generation of artists who don't fit that mold. Dangerous artists, controversial artists, artists the major labels won't touch, and someone's going to figure out how to monetize that audience. So in 1990, Iovine makes the decision that's going to change everything. He's going to start his own record label, and not just any record label, a label that signs the artists everyone else is afraid of, the controversial ones, the dangerous ones, the ones that make suburban parents nervous. But here's the problem. Starting a record label requires massive capital. You need money for artist advances, for recording costs, for marketing, for distribution. We're talking millions of dollars, tens of millions, and Iovine doesn't have that kind of money. He's done well as a producer, but he's not wealthy enough to fund this himself, so he needs a partner, someone with serious money who's willing to bet on this vision. And he finds one, Ted Field. And okay, Ted Field is fascinating. He's the heir to the Marshall Field's department store fortune. Old money, serious money, but he's not just sitting around spending his inheritance. He's a successful film producer. He's made Cocktail, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, some other hits. And he wants to get into the music business, so Iovine pitches him. And the pitch is basically, let's create a label that signs the artists no one else will sign. Let's go after the market everyone else is ignoring. Let's make the dangerous bet. And Field says yes. They form Interscope Records in 1990. Field puts up the capital. I believe the initial funding was around $30 million, but I'd need to verify that exact number. And Iovine is the president, running day-to-day operations. And they have a distribution deal with Atlantic Records initially, then later with Universal. So they've got the infrastructure, they've got the funding, and they've got Iovine's relationships and credibility in the music world. Now here's the question, who do they sign? What's the strategy? And this is where Iovine's instincts just prove to be absolutely perfect. He signs Dr. Dre, fresh off NWA, one of the most controversial groups in hip-hop history, and Dre wants to do a solo album. And every major label has passed on him or offered him terrible deals because they're scared of the controversy, scared of the explicit content, scared of the backlash. But Iovine sees it differently. He sees a once-in-a-generation talent who understands production, who has a unique sound, who has credibility in a culture that's exploding in popularity. So they sign Dre, And in December of 1992, Dre releases The Chronic. And I remember reading about the impact of this album. There's a great book called Original Gangstas by Ben Westhoff that goes deep into this era, and the album just completely changes hip-hop. It introduces G-Funk, this laid-back, funk-sampled sound that becomes the dominant style of 90s hip-hop. It goes triple platinum. It makes Dr. Dre a superstar. And it makes Interscope a major player in the industry, basically overnight. But wait, it gets better, because on that album there's this young rapper who's featured on multiple tracks, Snoop Doggy Dogg. Nobody knows who he is yet, but his voice, his flow, his charisma, it's undeniable. And Iovine sees it immediately. He signs Snoop, and in 1993, Snoop releases Dogga Style, and this album debuts at #1 on the Billboard 200, #1. A hip-hop album from an unknown artist, incredibly explicit, controversial, and it goes to #1 in its first week. It eventually goes quadruple platinum. Now let me paint a picture of what's happening here. It's 1993-1994. Interscope is barely 3 years old, and they've already released 2 of the biggest hip-hop albums of the decade. They're printing money. Dr. Dre is a household name. Snoop Dogg is everywhere. MTV is playing their videos constantly, but they're also getting massive backlash. See, Dolores Tucker, a civil rights activist, is crusading against gangsta rap. Bob Dole, who's running for president, mentions Interscope by name in speeches, criticizing them for releasing this music. There are calls for boycotts. Some stores won't carry Interscope releases. And here's where you see Iovine's character. He doesn't back down. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't try to sanitize the music. He stands behind his artists. He goes on news shows, does interviews, defends the music as artistic expression, as storytelling, as reflecting reality. And this loyalty, this willingness to take the heat, it makes his artists trust him completely. They know Iovine will fight for them. But the controversy is also a problem. Time Warner, which owned part of Interscope through their Atlantic Records distribution deal, they're getting crushed in the press. Their shareholders are upset. There's pressure from politicians. And in 1995, Time Warner sells their stake in Interscope. They're basically bailing out because the political pressure is too intense. Now, most labels would take this as a sign to change direction, tone down the content, sign safer artists, but Iovine does the opposite. He signs Tupac Shakur, and Tupac is even more controversial than Dre or Snoop. He's been shot multiple times, he's been arrested, he's feuding with Biggie and Bad Boy Records. It's the height of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. And Iovine gives him Death Row Records under the Interscope umbrella, full creative control, and Tupac releases All Eyes on Me in 1996, and it debuts at #1, goes 9 times platinum eventually, becomes one of the best-selling hip-hop albums of all time. So now it's the mid-90s. Interscope is massive. They've got Tupac, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg. They sign Marilyn Manson, who becomes another huge controversy magnet. They sign No Doubt, who crosses over into massive mainstream success. They sign Limp Bizkit during the nu metal wave. Every artist they touch turns to gold, and Jimmy Iovine is becoming one of the most powerful people in the music industry. But then tragedy strikes, September of 1996. Tupac is shot in Las Vegas, dies 6 days later, and this is devastating on multiple levels. Personally, Iovine had got close to Tupac, they'd worked together, had mutual respect. But also professionally, Tupac was one of their biggest artists, and now he's gone. And the whole gangsta rap era starts to shift after his death, especially after Biggie gets killed 6 months later. The culture changes. And this is where Iovine makes his next big move. It's the late 90s, and he sees a white kid from Detroit who's an incredible rapper, but nobody will sign him because of the racial dynamics of hip-hop, because his content is too controversial, because the mainstream isn't ready for him. And Iovine signs him, Eminem, and this is another perfect example of Iovine's instincts. He hears Eminem's demo tape, recognizes the talent immediately, understands that Dr. Dre should produce him, facilitates that partnership. The Slim Shady LP comes out in 1999, goes quadruple platinum. Eminem becomes one of the biggest stars in the world. The Marshall Mathers LP in 2000 sells almost 2 million copies in its first week. The Eminem Show in 2002, same thing, massive success. And Interscope is now one of the most successful labels in the world, maybe the most successful. They're selling tens of millions of records every year. But here's what's interesting. While all of this is happening, while Interscope is at its commercial peak, Iovine is seeing something that terrifies him. The music industry is about to collapse, and nobody else sees it coming, or if they see it, they're in denial about it, because because in 1999 Napster launches, and within months millions of people are downloading music for free. And the record industry, the major labels, they're all in denial. They think it's a fad. They think they can sue it away. They think people will keep buying CDs like they have for the last 15 years. But Iovine knows better. He understands technology, he understands youth culture, and he understands that once people get used to free music, they're never going back. The entire business model of selling records, dead, and he's watching this happen in real time. 2000, 2001, 2002, CD sales start declining, then they're plummeting. By 2005, the entire industry is in free fall. Labels are laying off staff, cutting budgets, dropping artists. It's a bloodbath. And Iovine is thinking, okay, what's next? How do we survive this? And he starts looking at technology companies. Apple launches iTunes in 2001 and Iovine sees potential there. He starts having conversations with Steve Jobs. They develop a relationship, and Iovine understands something crucial. The future isn't selling music. The future is either streaming, which is just starting to emerge, or it's selling the devices people use to consume music. So in 2006, Iovine has an idea, and he pitches it to Dr. Dre, who he's remained close with for 15 years at this point. And the idea is, let's make headphones. Now, Dre's first reaction, from what I've read in interviews, is basically headphones. That's not what we do. We make music, but Iovine explains his thinking. People are listening to music on garbage earbuds that come with their iPods. They're listening to MP3s, which are compressed files with reduced audio quality. They're getting the worst possible listening experience. And if we can make premium headphones that actually sound good, that make the music sound the way we intended it to sound in the studio, people will pay for that. And there's another element here. Iovine understands branding in a way that most people in the music industry don't. He understands that Dr. Dre's name means something. It represents quality, credibility, authenticity in hip-hop culture. And if they put Dre's name on these headphones, if they market them right, they can charge a premium. They can make these headphones a status symbol, not just a product. But here's the problem. Neither Iovine nor Dre know anything about manufacturing consumer electronics. They're music guys. They can recognize good sound, but actually designing and building headphones, that's an entirely different skill set. So they need a third partner, someone who understands the technical side. And they find him, Monster Cable, the audio cable company. Their CEO is a guy named Noel Lee, and he's got decades of experience in audio equipment, so they form a partnership. Monster handles the engineering and manufacturing, Iovine and Dre handle the design, the sound profile, the branding, the marketing, and they call them Beats by Dr. Dre. They launch in 2008. Now the initial reception from the audiophile community is brutal, and I mean brutal. People are tearing these headphones apart in reviews, saying they're overpriced, saying the sound quality doesn't match the price point, saying they're all marketing and no substance. And look, there's some truth to that criticism. If you're comparing Beats to equivalent headphones from traditional audio brands at the same price point, the Beats probably don't sound as technically accurate. They have a bass-heavy profile. They emphasize certain frequencies. They're not trying to be neutral studio monitors. But here's what the critics miss, and this is where Iovine's genius shows up. He's not targeting audiophiles. He's not trying to make the most technically perfect headphones. He's making headphones that sound good for hip-hop, for pop music, for bass-heavy modern production. And he's making them a fashion accessory, a status symbol, something you wear to make a statement, not just to listen to music. And the strategy works. By 2009, Beats is doing $180 million in revenue. Athletes are wearing them. Musicians are wearing them. They're showing up in music videos. LeBron James wears them to games. The entire US Olympic basketball team in 2012 shows up to London wearing Beats. It's everywhere, and it's becoming the dominant headphone brand for young people, despite costing $300 or more. But then there's a problem. Iovine and Dre are making money from Beats, but they don't own the whole company. Monster owns a significant stake, and in 2012 there's a falling out. The details are messy. There was litigation, competing claims about who contributed what, but the bottom line is Iovine and Dre buy out Monster's stake. Now they own the whole company. Well, they own it with some other investors, but they're the primary owners. And now we get to the really interesting part, because at this point in 2012, 2013, Beats is a successful headphone company. They're doing maybe $1 billion in revenue annually, but Iovine is thinking bigger, way bigger. He's looking at the streaming music landscape. Spotify exists but isn't in the US yet. Pandora exists but it's radio style. You can't pick specific songs. Apple has iTunes but it's still a download model, not streaming. And Iovine sees an opportunity. So Beats launches a streaming service, Beats Music, in January of 2014, and their pitch is basically we're going to have human curation. Real music experts, DJs, people with taste building playlists, not just algorithms. And the service is fine, it's decent, but it's not breaking through. They're only getting a few 100,000 subscribers. Spotify is in the US now and they're dominating. Beats Music is struggling. And this is where the Apple deal comes in. Now, I've read multiple accounts of how this deal came together. There's some great reporting from Billboard, from the Wall Street Journal, from various tech publications. And the way I understand it, Iovine and Tim Cook had been talking for a while. Apple wanted to get into streaming music, but they didn't really understand the space. They had iTunes, which was successful for downloads, but streaming was different. Different licensing, different user experience, different economics, and they knew they needed help. So in early 2014, Cook approaches Iovine and Dre about buying Beats. And initially, the discussion is probably just about the headphone business and maybe acquiring the Beats Music team. But as the negotiations progress, it becomes clear that Apple wants more than that. They want Iovine. They want his relationships with artists, his understanding of music culture, his credibility in that world. They want him to run Apple Music, to be the bridge between Silicon Valley and the music industry. And the number keeps going up. I've read that initial discussions were around maybe $2 billion, but by the time they finalize the deal, it's $3 billion. The biggest acquisition in Apple's history at that point. The deal closes in May of 2014. And here's what Apple gets for that $3 billion. They get the Beats headphone business, which is profitable and growing. They get the Beats Music technology and team, which becomes the foundation for Apple Music when it launches a year later. And they get Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre as executives. Iovine becomes crucial in convincing artists to support Apple Music, in getting exclusive releases, in shaping the service's strategy. Now let me stop here and talk about something that bothered me when I was researching this, because the narrative around the Beats acquisition is often dismissive. People say Apple overpaid. People say Iovine got lucky. People say the headphones were overpriced fashion accessories and Apple got conned. And look, I understand that perspective. $3 billion is an enormous amount of money, and on paper, the fundamentals didn't necessarily justify that valuation. But here's my take, and this is just my interpretation based on what I've read. I don't think Apple was buying a headphone company. I think they were buying access to culture. They were buying credibility in music. They were buying the relationship between technology and artistry that Iovine had spent 40 years building. And if you look at what happened after the acquisition, I think it was worth it for Apple. Apple Music launches in June of 2015, and it grows fast, really fast. By 2016, it has 20 million paying subscribers. By 2018, 50 million. By 2019, it passes Spotify in US subscribers, and Iovine is a big part of that success. He convinces major artists to give Apple exclusive releases. He shapes the user experience. He helps Apple understand how musicians think, what they want from a platform, how to support them better than Spotify does. And the Beats headphone brand, it keeps growing under Apple's ownership. They maintain the brand identity, the cultural cachet, the premium positioning, and it becomes a massive business within Apple. By some estimates, Beats generates $1 billion or more in annual revenue for Apple now. Maybe more, they don't break it out separately in their financials. So okay, let's zoom out. Let's look at the full arc of Jimmy Iovine's career, because I think there are some really interesting patterns here. Things we can learn from how he made decisions, how he navigated changes in the industry, how he repeatedly bet against conventional wisdom and won. Pattern 1, he always positioned himself to learn. When he was sweeping floors at the record plant, he could have just done his job and gone home. But he stayed late, he asked questions, he absorbed everything. When he was engineering, he was learning production. When he was producing, he was learning the business side. He was constantly expanding his skill set, constantly positioning himself for the next opportunity. Pattern 2, he wasn't afraid to make controversial bets, signing Dr. Dre when everyone else passed, signing Tupac at the height of the gangsta rap backlash, signing Eminem when nobody thought a white rapper could succeed, signing Marilyn Manson. Over and over, he signed artists that made people uncomfortable, that challenged the mainstream, that other labels wouldn't touch. And almost every time, those artists became massive stars. Pattern 3, he saw industry shifts before others did. He saw that MTV was changing the game in the 80s. He saw the digital collapse coming in the late 90s. He saw that streaming was going to replace downloads. He saw that consumer electronics was where the money was moving. And he didn't just observe these shifts, he repositioned himself to capitalize on them. Pattern 4, and this might be the most important one. He built deep relationships and maintained them. His friendship with Dr. Dre lasted decades, multiple business ventures, ups and downs. His relationship with Bruce Springsteen, with Stevie Nicks, with countless artists he worked with early in his career. These relationships became his most valuable asset. When he needed Dre to partner on beats, Dre trusted him because they'd been through everything together. When he needed to convince artists to support Apple Music, they took his calls because he'd been in the trenches with them for years. Now let's talk about the modern relevance here, because I think Iovine's story has some really interesting lessons for anyone navigating a career in 2025. The music industry in the 70s, 80s, 90s was going through constant disruption. Technology kept changing the game. MTV, CDs, digital downloads, streaming. And Iovine survived all of it, thrived through all of it, by being willing to completely reinvent himself. He went from engineer to producer to label executive to hardware entrepreneur to tech executive. 5 completely different careers, each one building on the last. And I think there's something there about not getting too attached to your identity, not defining yourself too narrowly. Iovine could have said, "I'm a producer, that's what I do." But instead he said, "I understand music and culture, and I'll apply that understanding however makes sense given what the market needs." And look at what's happening now with AI disrupting creative industries. We're going through another massive shift. The tools are changing, the business models are changing, the skills that matter are changing. And the people who are going to win are the people who can adapt, who can see where things are going, who can position themselves for the next wave rather than clinging to how things used to be. I also think there's something interesting about how Iovine combined art and commerce. He genuinely loved music, genuinely cared about the artistic side, but he also understood business, understood marketing, understood how to build sustainable economic models. And that combination, art and commerce together, that's rare. Most people are good at one or the other. Iovine was good at both. And that's what allowed him to bridge different worlds, to translate between artists and business people, to build things that worked both creatively and commercially. Okay, so where is Iovine now? He left Apple in 2018, officially retired from his executive role there. But he didn't actually retire. He's been investing in companies, advising startups, teaching a course at USC about the music industry. And here's something that surprised me when I found it. He donated a $70 million gift to USC in 2013 to create the USC Jimmy Iovine and Andre Young Academy for Arts, Technology, and the Business of Innovation. $70 million. That's a huge donation, especially for someone who came from nothing, who started out sweeping floors. And the Academy is designed to train students at the intersection of art, technology, and business. Exactly where Iovine spent his career. It's his way of passing on what he learned, of creating the next generation of people who can navigate between these worlds. And I think that's a perfect capstone to his career. He went from being the kid with no connections, no formal education, just obsessive work ethic and good instincts, to being in a position where he can endow an entire academic program at one of the best universities in the country. Now let me address something, because as I was researching this story, I kept finding criticisms of Iovine. People saying he exploited artists, people saying he made money off of black culture, people saying the Beats headphones were a rip-off overpriced status symbols that didn't actually sound that good. And look, some of that criticism has merit. The artist contracts at Interscope, like at any label, heavily favored the label. Some artists felt they got screwed financially. The Beats headphones were definitely overpriced compared to alternatives if you're just comparing technical audio quality. These are legitimate criticisms. But I also think there's more to the story. Iovine paid his artists better than most labels. He fought for them when they were controversial, when other labels wouldn't touch them. He helped build careers for people who had no other options. And with Beats, yeah, the headphones were expensive, but they also made premium audio accessible to people who'd never cared about headphones before. They made it cool to care about how your music sounded, and that's not nothing. I guess what I'm saying is, it's complicated. Iovine made a fortune, became incredibly wealthy, benefited from an industry that has a lot of problematic dynamics. But he also created opportunities for artists, pushed culture forward, and built things that mattered. And we can acknowledge both things at the same time. So let's bring this all back. Jimmy Iovine's career is 50 years of being in the right place at the right time, except it wasn't luck. It was positioning. It was seeing opportunities others missed. It was being willing to take risks when everyone else played it safe. It was building relationships and maintaining them. It was adapting when industries changed instead of clinging to the old way. He went from sweeping floors at 19 to selling a company to Apple for $3 billion at 61. And every single step of that journey, someone was telling him he was making the wrong choice. When he started Interscope and signed controversial artists, people said it would never work. When he started Beats, people said it was stupid, that Apple would never buy a headphone company. And every single time, he proved them wrong. And I think that's the final lesson here. Conventional wisdom is often wrong. The consensus view is often wrong. The safe bet is often the losing bet. And the people who build extraordinary careers, who create generational wealth, who fundamentally change industries, they're usually doing things that seem crazy at the time. They're making bets that most people think are too risky, too controversial, too different. But they see something others don't. They understand the market at a deeper level. And they're willing to bet everything on that understanding. That's Jimmy Iovine, from sweeping floors in Brooklyn to the executive suite at Apple, from nobody to one of the most powerful people in music, from $0 to $3 billion. And the crazy part, he did it by consistently making choices that seemed insane to everyone else. That's the pattern, that's the framework, that's what we can learn from. Alright, so that's the deep dive on Jimmy Iovine. From 19-year-old janitor sweeping floors at the record plant, to engineering for John Lennon at 21, to producing the biggest albums of the 80s, to building Interscope Records and signing every controversial artist the mainstream was afraid of, to seeing the digital collapse coming before anyone else, to creating Beats with Dr. Dre and selling it to Apple for $3 billion, 50 years. One continuous arc of seeing opportunities, taking risks, and proving everyone wrong. Now look, I pieced this together from dozens of sources over 2 weeks of research, and I'm sure some details aren't perfect, some timelines might be slightly off, but the core story, the core pattern of how he made decisions, that's solid, that's documented. If this kind of deep research is valuable to you, if you want to understand how these empires were actually built, hit that subscribe button. I release new episodes every single day. Every day, new company, new story, new patterns to learn from. I'm Alex Morgan. Thanks for listening to Behind the Billion.